She came back. Uninvited, without warning, just appeared on the doorstep, as if the past had suddenly decided to reclaim its place. The very same past he had long buried beneath layers of deceit, pain, and cold revenge. In her eyes, fear, and something that resembled a plea. In his silence, heavier than any scream. They both knew, one mistake, one careless word, and it would all collapse again. But this time, the game was played by his rules, and as the night thickened outside, it became clear someone wouldn't live to see the morning the same. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watched this video. I value every one of your comments. So, let's get started. The screaming started even before I opened the door. At first, I figured it was just a stray cat yowling somewhere nearby, until the heavy pounding of fists against glass cut through the noise. I yanked the front door open and stood motionless, staring. There she was, Jolyn, my ex, locked inside her Audi, which now dangled at an awkward angle as the tow truck hauled its front wheels off the ground. She was slamming her fists against the windows, her face contorted in a wild mix of terror and rage, hair flying, eyes wide, shrieking like she was being dragged into the abyss. Meanwhile, Damien, the tow truck driver, barely glanced at her. He kept the winch tight, arms tense, his movements steady and impassive. The brake lights flashed red as the Audi jerked forward suddenly. Inside, Jolyn flailed and thrashed behind the glass, a trapped animal with nowhere to go. She had no right to park in my driveway, not after everything she'd done. Watching her there, her windows rattling under her fists, her car steadily being dragged away with her trapped inside, felt almost poetic. But let me rewind and explain how we got here. Just last Saturday, I turned 34. Not exactly a milestone birthday, but at the time, Jolyn, still technically my wife, had promised me something special to mark the occasion. She spent the entire week dropping hints about a surprise, flashing secretive smiles whenever her phone lit up with a new message. I should have known something was off. Things between us had been crumbling for months, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. We had been together 6 years, met back in college, me, the broke scholarship kid juggling 3 jobs just to survive. Jolyn, by contrast, came from a wealthy family. She was the polished business major, wrapped in privilege like it was a second skin. Her parents, especially her father, Bennett, never hid their disdain for me. In their world of charity galas, private golf courses, and multi-million-dollar homes, I was little more than a stain. Still, I tried. I pushed harder at my modest tech job, took every promotion, worked late nights, desperate for a shred of their approval, or at least Jolyn's. But it was never going to be enough. That's important to understand before you can grasp the rest of the story. Because it was on my birthday, of all days, that Jolyn decided to set her plan into motion. I got home from a grueling day spent catering to impossible clients, clothes sticking to my skin, only to find the apartment dark and empty. A moment later, my phone buzzed with a text. Come to my parents' house. Big surprise. Trust me. Normally, that alone would have raised every red flag. The last place I ever expected, or wanted, to celebrate anything was at Jolyn's parents' sprawling mansion. But maybe, just maybe, I thought, she was trying to bridge the gap between us. So, like a fool, I went. Their enormous McMansion stood proudly at the end of a pristine cul-de-sac, the hedges outside trimmed with military precision. The moment I stepped inside, a heavy sense of dread hit me, that primal instinct that screams you've walked straight into a trap. The living room was packed with Jolyn's relatives. Her mother, Leona, lounged near the fireplace with a smug smirk. Jolyn's sister, Ariana, awkwardly hovered by a fake ficus. A scattering of cousins, none of whom had ever remembered my name, sipped champagne. Jolyn stood at the center of it all, a brittle, hollow smile plastered across her face. "Happy birthday," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Bennett chuckled under his breath, low and sneering, like a villain out of a bad movie. He even looked the part, silver hair slicked back, loafers that cost more than my rent. A walking cliché. And then Jolyn made her move. She pulled out a manila envelope and, without the slightest trace of regret, announced, "Surprise. I'm leaving you for someone who's actually worth something." I stood there, paralyzed. The room seemed to tilt and blur, sounds muffled as if I were sinking into deep water. Bennett's ugly laughter filled the air, the others shifting uncomfortably, though a few looked all too pleased. Leona popped a bottle of champagne, as if they were celebrating a business acquisition. Jolyn shoved the divorce papers into my hands, already filled out, requiring nothing but my signature. I remember glancing around the room, oddly detached, like I wasn't really there. I asked for a pen. For the first time, Jolyn's smile wavered. Bennett stepped forward, producing his expensive Mont Blanc fountain pen, the same brand he once bragged I could never afford. I didn't hesitate. I signed every line, no shouting, no tears, no scene for them to feast on. Just silence, crisp and deadly. When I finished, I handed the papers back to her, met her eyes and said, calm and steady, "Thanks for the birthday gift. Best one yet." Then I turned and walked out. No door-slamming dramatics, no final glances. I just left. I drove aimlessly for hours, letting the anger cool into something cold and sharp, a fury that clarified rather than consumed. Because let's be clear, I wasn't some sad fool they could discard and forget. Even then, I was planning how to tear down the entire illusion they had built. That night, I ended up at a grimy dive bar, nursing whiskey after whiskey, shaping my rage into something precise. My phone kept buzzing, messages from Jolyn. "Why aren't you fighting for us? Are you seriously giving up this easy? You really are the disappointment they said you were." I didn't reply, not once. By the time midnight rolled around, I had a plan. 3 steps, clean and simple. First, call Luther, an old college friend, now one of the fiercest divorce lawyers in the state. Second, dig up proof. We still shared a photo cloud account. If Jolyn had been cheating, there would be traces. Third, gather my people. Maybe not an army, but enough allies to spread the truth before Jolyn or Bennett could rewrite the story. Bennett, her father, carried more skeletons in his closet than even he could keep track of. Over the course of 6 years, I had overheard him boasting to his smug little circle about the underhanded deals he'd pulled off. I knew about the hidden settlements, the contractors he had cheated, and the shady accountant who massaged the numbers just enough to keep the wolves at bay. Bennett barely acknowledged me most of the time, which suited me perfectly. He had no clue how much I had uncovered. By the next morning, I had taken refuge on a friend's couch, my phone lighting up non-stop with frantic calls and desperate texts from Jolyn. She sounded rattled, clearly not expecting me to stand my ground without groveling for a second chance. Meanwhile, my attorney, Luther, was already charging ahead. By noon, he had fired off counterclaims and started digging into every shred of dirt we could weaponize against Bennett and Jolyn. Legally, I had secured my rightful share of our joint assets, leaving Jolyn stuck to manage hers alone. Not that I was complaining. I wasn't about to hand them any chance to accuse me of draining her accounts. Within 2 days, I was settled into a rented Airbnb, combing through every scrap of data synced through our shared iCloud. Old screenshots, messages, contacts, photos. That's when the full extent of Jolyn's betrayal finally hit me like a freight train. The guy's name was Reed, someone from her father's real estate company. Their chats made my stomach churn. The sickeningly sweet nicknames, the secret meetups at hotels, the condescending jokes about how clueless I supposedly was. Their affair had been simmering for months. It was the exact kind of evidence that would demolish her case in court. The next 3 weeks blurred together. I stuck to a routine: work, hit the gym, crash at the Airbnb. Luther kept feeding me updates. Apparently, Jolene's attorney had been banking on me being naive. But once we exposed her infidelity, her leverage crumbled completely. Jolene even had the gall to ask for alimony, but there wasn't a snowball's chance she would get a dime once Luther presented our evidence. Then her family started poking their heads in. Bennett didn't bother calling himself, but Leona left a syrupy voicemail rambling about healing and making things right. Hearing it only fueled my disgust, especially after the stunt they pulled on my birthday. And now you're pounding on my door like I'm supposed to just roll over? What's next? Jolene sent you here to grovel for her. Jolene doesn't beg, he spat. She's too good for you. I smiled thinly. That's rich, coming from you. Here's the deal. Sign the divorce papers, stay silent about her little affair, and maybe I'll be kind enough to let you walk away intact. I flung the door open, stepping fully into the hallway and letting it crash against the wall with a sharp bang. For a split second, Bennett flinched, maybe noticing I wasn't the same scrawny pushover from before, but his ego had him puffing up again. You think you scare me? I said, stepping closer. I'm already 10 steps ahead, Bennett. I have a lawyer smarter than you and enough dirt to bury you, so by all means, threaten me again. His mask cracked. I caught the flicker of fear in his eyes before he lunged, jabbing a manicured finger into my chest. You will let me in, he hissed. Jolene's heartbroken. Enough of this charade. We're taking her back home. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Home? I repeated. She's not a lost suitcase you can just haul off whenever you want. Bennett lunged, grabbing my shirt and yanking me forward, his face twisted in pure rage. You miserable. That was the breaking point. The memory of him laughing during the divorce talks ignited something in me. I peeled his hand off my shirt in one swift move and slapped him, hard and flat-palmed, across the face. The crack echoed down the hallway. His head jerked sideways and he stumbled back, dazed. He clutched his cheek, already flushed red, his eyes wide in disbelief. I didn't even flinch. That's assault, I said coldly. Get out, now, or next time, it won't be a warning. He opened his mouth like he was about to argue, but no words came out. His eyes glistened. From humiliation or from pain, I couldn't tell. And without another word, Bennett turned and staggered down the hallway, utterly broken. The landlord from the unit above cracked open his door, staring with bulging eyes at the scene unfolding below. Bennett bellowed, "This isn't finished!" But the tremor in his voice gave away his fear. Flushed with anger, he stomped off, and I quietly shut the door behind him. I leaned back against the wall, heart pounding, forcing out a trembling exhale. In all the years we'd spent together, I had never laid a hand on him, but today, Bennett had crossed an uncrossable line. When he grabbed me in a fit of rage, something inside me shattered. I didn't feel ashamed. No, what flooded me was a grim, cold satisfaction. Maybe I wasn't the good guy I'd always believed I was. Maybe I was finally becoming the villain everyone said I would be. And truth be told, I didn't hate the feeling. After that explosive confrontation, it was clear I couldn't stay in the Airbnb a moment longer. I soon found a modest 3-bedroom rental in a quiet, respectable part of town. Exactly the breathing space I needed to start over. No more cramped, suffocating living arrangements. I needed room to build something new, a workshop where I could dive into my growing passion, refinishing and selling antique furniture online. Jolene had always mocked the idea, sneering that it was beneath me. But when my first sale closed and the profit hit my account, a fierce sense of pride rushed through me. As the divorce slogged forward, I began casually dating again. At first, it was nothing serious, mostly just dinners and conversations to fill the empty evenings. Then I met Renee. She wasn't anything like the privileged, shallow people I used to surround myself with. She was a freelance graphic designer, sharp, funny, and uninterested in my salary or what kind of car I drove. She cared about the things I built, about the dreams I was finally brave enough to say out loud. It caught me off guard, how real it felt. Over the next few weeks, my world slowly shifted. I finalized the purchase of a small but charming house, not extravagant, but with a huge backyard perfect for a dog, something I'd always wanted but Jolyn had always vetoed, claiming her non-existent allergies. With the divorce nearing its messy end, I decided to take the leap. I visited a rescue shelter and found Marlowe, a three-legged pit bull with sad eyes and a heart full of loyalty. He became my constant companion, my anchor. I spent my days working, my nights with Marlowe and Renee, and little by little, the storm cloud that had hung over me for so long began to dissipate. But I never forgot the betrayals. Word started circulating that Bennett's real estate ventures were collapsing. Gossip about financial fraud bubbled up. Rumors that he was under investigation for manipulating his accounts. Good. Let him squirm, let him feel the same helplessness I once endured. It was the justice I had been silently wishing for. 6 months after what had felt like total ruin, and fittingly, on my birthday, I hardly recognized the person I'd become. Sharper, stronger. The divorce was finalized, and Jolyn walked away with almost nothing. I let her keep a few old furniture pieces, partly out of pity, but mostly because I wanted to start fresh, picking everything for myself. The house belonged to me, supported by a stable job and a lucky stock market investment I'd made thanks to a tip from a friend. Life wasn't perfect, but it was finally, completely mine, and that was enough. As for the small, strategic rumors I'd seeded about Bennett's misdeeds, I felt no regret. I had stopped pretending this was a fair world. I had learned the new rules and how to use them. One Thursday night, I was cooking a simple pasta dish with homemade sauce while Renee flipped through a design magazine on the couch. Marlowe snored contentedly at her feet. My phone chimed, a notification from the doorbell cam. It was close to 9 p.m., and I frowned. Pulling up the app, I saw her, Jolyn, standing on my doorstep with 2 battered suitcases. I muttered under my breath, "You've got to be kidding me," pressing my palms hard against the countertop. Renee glanced up, alarmed by my tone. "What's wrong?" she asked. "It's Jolyn," I said, the name bitter on my tongue. "She's outside." Renee's eyebrows lifted slightly in surprise. "Are you going to let her in?" she asked carefully. Drying my hands on a dish towel, I stared at the screen. Jolyn looked disheveled, her jacket wrinkled, hair thrown into a messy ponytail. She looked smaller somehow. The arrogant, icy confidence she once flaunted was nowhere to be seen, but I knew better than to be softened by pity. "I'll handle it," I said, my voice even. "Keep Marlowe inside." Renee nodded. I stepped out, closing the door quietly behind me. The night was cool and smelled faintly of cut grass. Jolyn blinked rapidly, her lips trembling. "Travis," she croaked, voice breaking, I know I don't deserve to be here, but I have nowhere else to go." I glanced meaningfully at her bags. "You could always go to your parents' estate," I said, my tone like ice, "or stay with your sister, or check into a hotel." She let out a choked sound. "I can't," she whispered. "My father's under federal investigation. They've frozen everything. We're broke." Tears welled up in her eyes. "They're selling the house to cover legal fees." A cold, humorless smirk touched my lips. "Funny how karma works," I said. Jolyn swallowed hard, her gaze drifting to the warmly lit window behind me, catching a glimpse of the life inside. "Who's there?" she asked hesitantly. "Renee," I said, voice flat and final. "Renee who?" She craned her neck, trying to peer around me. "That's none of your business," I said, crossing my arms tightly. "What are you doing here, Jolyn?" Her lips trembled before she exhaled shakily. "I came because—" She stumbled, searching my face. Then the words came tumbling out. "Because I'm pregnant." The world seemed to tilt sideways. A storm of frantic thoughts crashed through my mind. Pregnant? Who was the father? She must have seen suspicion flash across my face because she rushed to add, "It's yours, Travis, I swear. I haven't been with anyone since Reed, and we ended things months ago. Please, just let me in so we can talk." Her voice wavered, and her expression was full of fear. "I have nowhere else to go," she whispered. I hesitated, uncertain if she was being honest. The timeline could check out. Reed had been out of her life for about 4 or 5 months, if I remembered right. Was it possible? Yes. But it could also be a well-timed lie meant to manipulate me. I kept my face expressionless, though inside, anger, disbelief, and unease churned like a storm. "You're not staying here," I said, voice devoid of emotion. "We signed an agreement. You made your decision. You walked away. I built a life without you and all your drama." Jolynn stepped closer, reaching for my arm, but I pulled back sharply. "I swear on everything, I'm telling the truth," she pleaded, her voice shaking as tears slid down her cheeks. "I went to the free clinic last week. I'm about 8 weeks pregnant. It's yours, Travis. 8 weeks. If she was right, that would mean the baby was conceived long after we had been together for the last time, if my memory served me. It had been around 3 months before the divorce was finalized when we were last intimate. My mind raced, trying to line up the dates. Was she stretching the truth? Or had she simply miscalculated? Grinding my teeth together, I let out a hard breath. "And I'm just supposed to believe you?" I asked, a sharp, bitter laugh escaping my throat. "You've lied to me enough times before." "Travis, please," she whispered, her desperation raw and trembling. "Just one night. That's all I'm asking. I'm so exhausted. I'll be gone tomorrow. I need to talk about the baby." Despite everything, a thread of panic wound its way through me. If, by some cruel twist, this child really was mine, I couldn't ignore that. But the louder voice inside me boiled with rage, remembering the way she humiliated me in front of all my friends at my own birthday party, remembering her father's threats. And now she dared show up with this story? "Let me guess," I said, voice low and dangerous, my gaze narrowing. "You saw me finally putting my life back together. Decent job, stable home, and now that Daddy's cut you off, you figure I'm your safety net? That's not—" She tried to protest, her voice cracking. "You can despise me if you want," she said hoarsely, her voice thick with tears. "But this isn't just about me anymore. There's a baby now." I clamped my jaw so tightly it hurt. Behind me, I heard the faint creak of the door opening. Renee stepped out, standing tall, her arms folded defensively across her chest. "Is everything okay?" she asked carefully, her eyes darting between me and Jolynn. Jolynn's gaze immediately locked onto Renee, sizing her up. She took in Renee's casual clothes, her relaxed but confident posture, the warm glow spilling out from the house. I could practically feel the bitterness radiating off Jolynn. She barked out a short, harsh laugh. "So this is the new girlfriend, huh?" she jeered. Renee straightened up, bristling. "Excuse me?" she snapped. I quickly moved between them. "Jolynn, stop," I said firmly. "This has nothing to do with her. You can't just show up out of nowhere with your luggage slinging accusations and demands," I added coldly. Jolynn shot Renee a scathing look. "Did he ever tell you what a pathetic loser he used to be?" She spat venomously. "Funny how now he's just a heartless bastard." Something inside me broke loose. "You called me a failure?" I said in a low, furious tone. "You, your father, your entire family. You tore me apart in front of everyone and laughed as I signed the divorce papers. And now you expect me to feel sorry for you?" The air between us became thick, charged with rage and wounded pride. Jolynn's hands clenched into tight fists, her eyes darting furiously between Renee and me. Without warning, she lunged forward, trying to shove past me into the house. "This is still my home," she screamed. I caught her easily with one arm, shoving her back without hurting her, but making it very clear. "Not anymore," I said coldly. "You forfeited that the day you walked away." Jolene erupted, hurling curses and insults at both Renee and me, her voice shrill and splintering. Before I could react, she lunged at Renee, grabbing a fistful of her hair and yanking violently. Renee let out a cry, struggling against her, trying to shield herself. "Let me go!" Renee shouted, throwing up an arm defensively. I grabbed Jolene's wrist, prying her fingers off with enough force to break her grip, but not enough to injure her. "Enough!" I barked, stepping between them once more. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Jolene stumbled back, her chest heaving, tears streaming down her furious, flushed face, her hair messy and wild, escaping its ponytail. She looked completely out of control. Her face was streaked with tears as she screamed, "This was supposed to be my life." Her voice broke under the weight of her fury. "That was my house. You're my husband. How could you discard me for her?" Without missing a beat, I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling the police," I said sharply. "You just assaulted my girlfriend and you're trespassing." A mocking, hollow laugh escaped her lips, daring me. "You won't do it," she taunted. But her confidence drained the moment she caught sight of my phone's lit-up 911 screen. Realizing I wasn't bluffing, she faltered, her breathing becoming erratic. Nevertheless, I pressed the call button, refusing to let her dominate the situation again. Though adrenaline made my hands unsteady, I forced myself to maintain a cold, steady exterior. When the dispatcher answered, I clearly reported that my ex-wife had broken onto my property, attacked my girlfriend, and refused to leave. They assured me that officers were already on their way. Every second stretched unbearably while we waited. Jolene stalked the porch like a caged animal, hurling insults between gasping sobs. "You're a monster!" she spat. I stared back at her, my pulse pounding. "You don't even know half of it," I said in an even tone. Red and blue lights appeared sooner than I expected, bouncing off the dark street. Maybe a nearby patrol had caught the dispatch. 2 officers, 1 man, 1 woman, climbed out of the cruiser, both carrying the weary look of those who'd seen too many domestic disputes. I quickly filled them in, pointing out the swelling on Renee's head where Jolene had grabbed her hair. Jolene immediately launched into hysterical sobbing, insisting that I had set her up. The female officer eyed me skeptically at first, but after spotting the fresh scratches on Renee's arm and listening carefully to both sides, she gently asked Jolene to step aside. Jolene refused, her voice rising to a shriek as she hurled wild accusations. She claimed I was lying, that she was pregnant, that our past marriage gave her rights to be there. The male officer tried to calm her down, but Jolene, in a sudden frenzy, shoved him back. That sealed her fate. After a brief exchange of glances, the officers moved decisively to arrest her for assault and disorderly conduct. As they placed her in cuffs, she screamed my name, her voice raw and furious. Curtains twitched in neighboring windows. One officer led her toward the patrol car, reading her rights aloud as her luggage sat abandoned on my porch. Renee stood behind me, arms hugged tightly around herself, her hair disheveled from the struggle. "That was crazy," she whispered. I gave a stiff nod, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. "Are you all right?" I asked. She shrugged, wincing. "My scalp's sore, but I'll survive." I didn't think she'd totally lose it like that. Turning back to watch the cruiser pull away, the flashing lights painting the street in urgent color, I let out a long breath. "Neither did I confessed. "But maybe I should have. She's desperate." Renee didn't bring up the pregnancy claim. Instead, she simply reached for my hand, squeezed it gently, and said, "Come on, let's get inside." The rest of the night was spent in a tense haze, trying to talk through every possibility. If Jolene really was pregnant, I might be facing fatherhood. If the timeline didn't fit, it could just be another one of her desperate manipulations. Either way, she was in custody for the night. And for now, that was enough. No angry father-in-law was banging at my door, no judgmental elites breathing down my neck. I poured 2 glasses of wine. Renee sipped hers slowly, still visibly rattled. Marlowe curled up at our feet, picking up on the heavy tension. "Why do people have to be so complicated?" she murmured, combing her fingers through her tangled hair. "Money," I said flatly. "Status. Pride. It destroys people." We turned on the TV for a distraction, but my mind refused to settle. Jolene's furious face kept flashing behind my eyes. The next morning, I called Luther to bring him up to speed. He didn't even sound surprised. "Desperate people do desperate things," he said calmly. "Stay sharp. And if she's actually pregnant, demand a DNA test once she's out." "She says she's 8 weeks along," I told him. "But the math doesn't add up with the last time we—" Luther cut me off. "Don't waste time worrying about that. It might not even be yours. Stay cool. If it comes to it, we'll handle everything legally. Just stay alert." I thanked him and hung up, forcing myself to shove the entire mess to the back of my mind. 2 quiet days slipped by without a word from Jolene. Then, on the 3rd morning, just as the sun was rising, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, I found Ariana, Jolene's sister, standing there. She looked worn out, her eyes swollen and red. "Travis," she said softly, "can we talk?" She quickly raised her hands when she saw me hesitate. "I come in peace," she added. I studied her carefully. Unlike Bennett and Leona, Ariana had never treated me like trash. She always seemed a little removed from their arrogance. Still, I stayed wary. "What do you want?" I asked bluntly. Shifting uneasily, she said, "Jolene's out. She's staying with me for now, but I can't keep her there. Dad's financial situation is falling apart. The firm's close to collapsing. She's got nowhere else to go, and she's still obsessed with you." I let out a tired breath. "And what exactly am I supposed to do about that?" "Just talk to her," Ariana said, her voice strained. "She says she's pregnant. She showed me some clinic paperwork. I don't know if it's legit or if she's hiding something, but either way, you deserve to know. She's still furious over getting arrested." She was seething and clearly scared. Her job was gone. Dad was a wreck. Everything seemed to be crumbling at once. I could practically taste the bitterness on my tongue. "And you expect me to help?" I said, catching the glint of tears in Ariana's eyes. "Just because there was a time when she and I actually mattered to each other. Because somehow once what we had was real. And now, if she's carrying my kid—" I let my voice trail off deliberately, letting the weight of it hang in the air. For a split second, I thought about slamming the door in her face. But I didn't. Maybe a part of me needed some kind of ending. Maybe something twisted inside me still craved the truth. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice tight. "But she's not staying here. That's non-negotiable." Ariana lowered her head in understanding. "I know. I want to be there for her too, but I can't. And Dad's not exactly up to it either." I didn't respond. She offered a small, almost defeated shrug, then turned and walked away. Her posture slumped, defeated. I stood in the doorway, unmoving, staring out at the empty street, wondering exactly when my life had started to mimic some trashy soap opera. After a long moment, I shut the door and blew out a heavy breath. There was no way I was letting Jolene back into my life, pregnant or not. If the kid turned out to be mine, I'd meet my obligations, but only the bare minimum. Nothing beyond what the law required. Days drifted by. Jolene stayed silent. Meanwhile, Renee and I carried on. We even started making plans for a quick getaway to the coast, a chance to clear our heads, breathe easier. Work was running smoothly. My little side hustle flipping furniture had blown up after a few lucky viral posts. For once, life was actually starting to feel good again. But Jolene wasn't done. It was late, after 11, when my phone buzzed. A text from a neighbor. "Your ex is out front in her car again?" I sucked in a sharp breath, jaw tightening until it ached. Crossing the room, I pulled the blinds aside just a sliver. There it was, the silver Audi her father had handed her like a prize. It was parked under the trees, lights off, lurking. A sleek, flashy machine worth more than I made in 6 months. She wasn't dropping by. She was waiting. Watching. I stepped back from the window, heart pounding in my ears. Upstairs, Renee was asleep, blissfully unaware. I wasn't about to wake her. I didn't want Jolene's madness reaching her. The minutes dragged out painfully. The Audi stayed right where it was, and then the messages started. Let me in. We need to talk about the baby. You can't just ignore me forever. I'll wait all night if I have to. A cold, hard knot twisted itself tight in my stomach. This wasn't a flash of rage. It was deeper, a low, simmering fury. She was invading the fragile peace I had worked so hard to rebuild. After everything, the assault on Renee, the cops, the endless web of lies, Jolene was still clawing her way back in. Enough. I snatched up my phone and made the call. Damien picked up, groggy. We hadn't been in touch much lately, but he owed me big time. He ran a tow company now. That's messed up, he muttered after I laid it all out. You want me to handle it? My hand ached from how tightly I was gripping the phone. Yeah, I said. Do it. I rattled off the address, promised to cover whatever it cost. Let Jolene explain to her daddy why his shiny toy was sitting in impound. About half an hour later, bright headlights cut through the darkness. Damien's truck crept around the corner like a shark circling a wounded fish. I stayed hidden behind the curtain, every nerve humming. His lights swept across the Audi, locking onto it like prey. The truck eased to a stop. The hydraulic arms dropped with a metallic whir, cables unraveling with a snap. Then, sudden movement. The Audi's door flung open, and Jolene stumbled out, wild-eyed, her hair a tangled mess. She looked like she'd been yanked straight out of a nightmare, which, in a way, she had. She must have dozed off in the car. Damien didn't so much as blink. He moved efficiently, ignoring her frantic shouting as she tried to get in his way. Jolene hurled herself between the tow truck and her car, arms outstretched like she could somehow physically block him. The desperation pouring off her was almost suffocating in the cool night air. She yelled, pointed, screamed, pleaded, even tried bargaining. Damien didn't react. He worked around her like she was little more than an annoying branch in his path. The truck's engine growled low as it began lifting the Audi's front end off the pavement. That's when Jolene completely lost it. She dove into the car, scrambling over the seats, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, as if sheer force of will could stop what was coming. From the window, I watched her rock back and forth inside the cabin, her fists hammering against the glass, her mouth open in a silent, agonized scream. But the car kept rising, bit by bit, cradled higher by the steel arms. The back wheels dangled awkwardly. The Audi looked like it was being dragged into submission. Inside, Jolene thrashed wildly, punching the dashboard, the windows, trapped inside her own gleaming prison. Finally, the tow truck began to move forward, dragging the Audi and Jolene down the street. The car bounced slightly behind it, like some twisted trophy. Inside, she was just a dark, furious shape, her face mashed against the rear window, her hand pounding furiously against the glass as the distance grew. Still, I didn't budge, not out of fear, out of conviction. This was the outcome she had earned. My answer, clear and final. The truck rounded the corner, disappearing into the night. The red taillights flickered and faded into the darkness. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.